Gareth Davies, Shadow Financial Secretary, is with us. Gareth, morning to you. Thanks very much for being with us. I mean, you guys voted against this as well. You're as much to blame as the government for where we find ourselves.
I wouldn't say that. I think, we've been pretty clear that we need to get the welfare budget down. We need to get health and disability benefits down because they're at unsustainable levels. They've increased quite significantly since the pandemic. And so I think we do agree that we do need to tackle that. The difference is that Labour were not tackling that. The bill wouldn't have achieved that, and certainly not now that they've U-turned on all the provisions.
Under the Conservative government, of course, the welfare bill rose exponentially. You had a bit of time after the pandemic. This argument was made by Helen Whately yesterday. You could have made changes at that point,
yes,
before the election.
And that's right. And we did start to make changes. We were changing the criteria on PIP, for example. But there were two changes in particular I just would highlight. The first is on what's called the fit note system. And this is a point at which people go to a GP and get signed off for work. And that was happening in 94% of the cases. And in many instances, of course, there are some people who cannot work and should not work because of their condition. But in many instances, there are people who can work. And actually, it may be beneficial if they do work. And so we were going to reform that system to ensure that there was more of a focus on what people can do rather than what they can't do. And then once they're in the benefits system, of course, it's a perpetual cycle, and so there's a thing called work capability assessments that we were also reforming, which again would focus on getting people into the workforce. And so those are reforms that the OBR have been clear would save billions, but also mean that we have a more efficient welfare system.
I mean, how many people would lose their benefits under the Conservative plan, do you think? You said 94% of people were getting this sort of fit note thing signed off, which you're suggesting was way too high. I mean, what sort of percentage do you think?
Well, I don't know what the exact percentage is, because obviously it's done on a case-by-case basis. But the OBR, for example, on the workforce capability assessments, projected that it would save about £2 billion in 2030, and there would be hundreds of thousands that would be brought out of the welfare system and into work. And so it would have a material impact. But I think the point here is that there's no one single measure that we need to take. And last night was, even before the U-turns, it was about, saving money because Rachel Reeves needs to find more cash because they've been spending too much. But what we really need is wholesale reform. You'll remember we introduced universal credit a few years ago, and the purpose behind that was to simplify the system and make sure that work always pays, because ultimately we need, we need more people into the workforce. And last night won't achieve that.
I mean, you'll know that universal credit, of course, is they're not getting rid of that. They've modified it slightly. Is it the Conservative position that there are just too many people who are abusing the system and taking benefits when they shouldn't?
I think there is a degree of fraud in the system, but I think it's deeper than that, in that there is a sort of presumption of signing people off work in many instances, and I think that's where you get to the 94% on the fit note system, for example. And so having a more nuanced, specialised approach to assessing people's ability to work, I think is the way forward.
And the call has been to bring back face-to-face appointments. Helen Whately was again telling me that you guys were starting to bring that in, but you had 14 years yet, and then you did have years after the pandemic when it got a lot worse to bring these changes in.
So it's a fair challenge. Let me just address that in two parts. First of all, before the pandemic, we were taking measures to reduce economic inactivity, and actually 100,000 people every year before the pandemic were becoming more economically active, and one of the reasons was, as I say, the UC reforms. The pandemic really did change a lot and actually undid a lot of that progress that we had made. And in particular, the health and disability benefits bill has increased substantially. I mean, 1 in 4 people now report some kind of disability. 1 in 3 of PIP claimants have something related to mental health conditions. And so it did, it is a fact that it did balloon under COVID. And we were making progress. In November 2023, we announced the Back to Work plan under Jeremy Hunt as Chancellor. And this would have reformed, as I say, the system and ensured that we start to claw back those...
Well, look, Gareth, if it's so important to you, and Helen Whately said it was very important to the Conservatives, why didn't you back the government on this and then work with them to improve improve the legislation.
We just don't think that they're committed to this. I mean,
well, they are committed. They've had a massive rupture in their party to try and get this through.
I mean, this is the thing. The Prime Minister did start off by saying, "Look, we'll find savings of $5 billion. You know, that's good."
But you weren't backing that either. You were blackmailing him with no tax rises to make sure that you would get his support. Well, you weren't being serious about his support.
The point is that, look, by 2030, we're going to be spending £100 billion if we do nothing on health and disability benefits. That's more than we spend on defence. That's 1 in every £4 raised from income tax is going to go to health and disability benefits. That's not sustainable. It's not good for anybody. And our point was that even at $5 billion, that's a drop in the ocean. It's not going to do enough. We believe in actual reform of the welfare system, and that's why we couldn't support it.
OK, Gareth Davies, Shadow Financial Secretary to the Treasury. Really good to have you this morning. Thanks very much.